It's 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'm mopping up whiskey-smelling puke after a country music concert in West Virginia. This is my enduring image from college. And it's because, like, a lot of my friends, they would be able to take these unpaid internships at investment banks and at law firms, or, get an apartment in Washington, D.C. and work on a congressional staff. But I needed a job that actually paid money. And that meant going home, living with my parents in West Virginia. And in the 1990s, in 1990s where I was living, that meant working as a midnight janitor and on a beer truck. The second most enduring image I have from college was working on that beer truck. We worked 13-hour days. The wheels would roll out of the warehouse at 6 o'clock every morning. And even though the guy who drove the truck looked like Hercules, there were bars that we would not deliver to after noon. We'd drive up into the hills in rural West Virginia. It'd be 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning, and we'd go into the bar with the kegs. And the bar would be nearly filled, and it'd be filled with men who had three things in front of them: a shot glass with whiskey, a can of beer, and their gun. Fast forward 20 years, and a typical work day is I'm working in the White House Situation Room as Hillary Clinton's senior advisor for innovation. And in those 20 years, the road from that beer truck and that job as a midnight janitor, mopping up whiskey-smelling puke, went through West Baltimore, actually through the 1300 block of McCullough Street, Booker T. Washington Middle School, where I was a sixth grade teacher and where I began my career. And it was rough at Booker T, too. I mean, I figured this out pretty early when we had the beginning of the year parent-teacher-student conference. And in one class with 35 students, only one parent showed up. I taught sixth graders. They were 11 through 16 years of age. And I had two 11-year-old girls get pregnant. 11 years old. These kids had no chance. They had so little hope, so little opportunity. And in the 12 years after I left the classroom, I was able to count up 12 students of mine who had been murdered, who perished on the streets of Baltimore in the 12 years since I taught them in sixth grade. As I was teaching and as I was beginning my career, life was getting tougher in West Virginia, too. Oxycontin, crystal meth, obesity, unemployment. These things were growing more and more pervasive. And it was these three experiences that I had: midnight janitor and working on a beer truck in West Virginia, teaching sixth graders in West Baltimore, and then, rising up to the top of the government and working in the White House Situation Room on any given day. Those three very different sets of experiences gave me some insights that I wanted to share with you today. And the first is that the despair in West Baltimore and in West Virginia come from the same place. They both come from a lack of opportunity and the lack of hope that produces. Over the last 30 years, our economy has changed enormously because of globalization. And what was once America's industrial and manufacturing base disappeared, and our economy transitioned into one that is increasingly technology-rich and knowledge-based. So the jobs that you could have gotten in the port, the factory, the mill, or the mine that gave you a living wage and a pension and health care benefits, those disappeared, and they didn't come back. And if you were lucky, you were able to get a low-paying job bussing tables or folding bed sheets. Now, what I'd like to do is give a couple insights about, now that so much of Baltimore and West Virginia didn't make it in yesterday or today's industries, what can we do to position ourselves to compete and succeed in tomorrow's industries, in the industries of the future? I want to start, though, sharing a dirty little secret. sharing a simple fact that most people don't believe me when I say it, but I believe it with all my head and all my heart. And that is that the kids that I grew up with in West Virginia and the kids that I taught in West Baltimore were every bit as smart as the people who sat beside me in the White House Situation Room. They did not founder, they did not fail, they did not make it because of their DNA. I am utterly convinced. I went to school with kids in West Virginia and I taught kids in West Baltimore that they had the exact same or better raw material than the people who I've trafficked with around the world and who I've worked with at the top of government. So I just want to use that as something to get out there. This is not about DNA. This is entirely about access to opportunity. Now, I wrote a book called The Industries of the Future. And the premise of the book is that if the last 20 years were shaped in significant measure by digitization and the rise of the internet, if that's what produced the jobs and if that's what produced the wealth, what's next? If that was 1995 to 2015, what's 2016 to 2026? And in my book, I write about a lot of different industries, but I want to flag 3 where we are at the white-hot center of them here in Baltimore. Number 1, big data analytics. Land was the raw material of the agricultural age. Iron was the raw material of the industrial age. Data is the raw material of the information age. If you get any sort of an academic basis in data analytics, you've got a couple decades of employment, pretty guaranteed. If you look across the harbor at that growing, beautiful headquarters of Under Armour, the best way to get a job at Under Armour is not to be a jock. It's to develop skills in analytics so that as it goes from being a sports apparel maker to being a connected fitness maker and putting sensors in all of its clothing, those are the high-paying jobs that are really growing there. Industry number 2, cybersecurity. We don't lack jobs here in Maryland. We just don't have people with the skills to fill the jobs. And at the top of the list is cybersecurity. If you have an associate's degree, which is just a couple steps past a high school degree, not an undergraduate degree, there are thousands and thousands and thousands of job openings, with starting wages typically beginning in the 60,000s. If you get a college degree and you have a baseline certificate in cybersecurity, the average opening is $93,000. This is all here where we sit, and this is only going to be a growing industry. Industry number 3, genomics. The world's last trillion-dollar industry was created out of computer code. The world's next trillion-dollar industry is going to be created out of our own genetic code. And we are at the white-hot center of it. Now, you don't have to have a medical degree from Johns Hopkins or be a scientist to be able to get a job in what is going to be possibly the Silicon Valley of genomics here. There's a very large ecosystem that is going to be created around the commercialization of genomics. It's going to create tens of thousands of jobs here. The question is, how inclusive is it? It's a horrible thing to be in a place that is booming where you don't have the skills. In San Jose, which is right in the middle of Silicon Valley, San Jose has more than 4,000 homeless people. So these are 3 big industries that are going to be growing. And I want to flag 3 things that all of us can do who are parents, who are caregivers, or who have young people who we choose to care about and try to steward their well-being. There are 3 things that I think we can do right now to help ensure that they can compete and succeed in the industries of the future. Number one is do not rely on the system to save you. Where I grew up in West Virginia and where I taught in Baltimore, the systems failed these kids a lot of the time. My mother had a nickname, Becky the Barbarian. And she earned that nickname because she was a relentless advocate. She was a relentless advocate for our well-being at school, but then she also insisted we work and we enrich our educations when we get home. I got news for you. I don't care who our next mayor is. I don't care who our next school superintendent is. I don't care who our next police commissioner is. I guarantee you not one of them is the Messiah. Not one of them is going to save you. Save yourself, save your kids. Hold others to account, try to change the system, but also hold yourself to account and create your own system so that regardless of what's going on with a city's power structures, you've created a system that ensures that your kids will compete and succeed in tomorrow's economy. Number 2, make sure your kids learn languages, foreign languages and programming languages. And we're now in the excuse-free zone. If you Google Baltimore free computer programming classes, you will get 20 pages of results. Your challenge is not finding a course near you. Your challenge is figuring out which of the 15 good options you have to choose from. And it does not matter what zip code you live in. And if you don't want your kids to leave the house, all you need is an internet connection. The internet today has abundant free ways for your children to learn how to program. What you have to do is migrate them away from gaming, chatting, and surfing, and into learning. Final thing, number 3, is be a lifelong learner yourself. When I think about those 12 kids of mine from Booker T. Washington Middle School who died, they perished. They didn't make it in part because their parents didn't make it. The kids who struggled in West Virginia and in West Baltimore, who I know had the God-given ability, but didn't make it in part. They didn't make it in part because they didn't have parents who were being their best steward. I've traveled all over the world, the equivalent of 25 circumnavigations around the globe. And at the beginning of every flight I take, there's an announcement that says, in the event of an emergency, if the oxygen mask comes down, help yourself first and then help your child. None of us are bulletproof. None of us have economic certainty in front of us. So for those of you in your 40s and 50s in particular, now is a terrible time to lose your jobs because it's increasingly the skills and the characteristics of people in their 20s and 30s who people are looking to hire. So you will be a great model for your children, and you will help, you will help ensure their economic security for the future if you also commit to becoming a lifelong learner. It's not the strongest who survive or the most intelligent, but that most adaptable to change. The loss of hope and the loss of opportunity is fatal. It's what killed my students, and it's what continues to drive me today to try to illuminate what the opportunities and the challenges are in the industries of the future. And with that, trying to honor their memory and trying to honor the work that they didn't get to do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very well done.